discussion on leadership in broadband. I'd like to recognize a few of our distinguished guests this morning. First of all, from the city of Ventura, we have Council Member Cheryl Heitman. From the city of Ojai, we have Council Member Bill Wyrick. In the back. From the city of Moore Park, we have Council Member Roseanne Mikos. Also from the city of Moore Park, we have Council Member Tim Simmons. We also have from the city of Westlake Village, our Mayor Brad Halpern. And from the city of Santa Paula, Council Member John Proctor. And also from the city of Westlake Village, Council Member Kelly Honey. And speaking and here with us as well as Council Member Ned Davis. And finally, we also have our State Assembly Member Jackie Irwin. And now to provide some welcome remarks and opening comments, I want to invite Matt Carroll, our Assistant County Executive Officer with the County of Ventura.
First of all, Mike Power sends his regards. He was scheduled to speak this morning, but the Coastal Commission decided to hold probably what is the key hearing this morning on a little project you may have heard called Fisherman's Wharf. And so he and several of our board members thought it would be very important that they attend firsthand and show the county's support behind it. So he sends his regard and thanks you all for coming and wish he could be here with you. And, but you got me instead. So I do have a bit of background in technology. I spent the first 10 years in national computer corporations and spent some time in the field of technology. And it's no doubt no news to you as well as it is to me that technology is impacting our lives at an ever-increasing rate, probably at the fastest rate in civilization. How many of you have heard of Moore's Law? I'm sure most of you have, right? Gordon Moore, who back in 1965 was one of the co-founders of the Intel Corporation. Well, I think they were out of the garage by then, but they were still pretty young at the point in time. He hypothesized that the number of transistors on a particular piece of space on a microchip would double, and therefore the power of the computer would double every year, basically into the future. And it slowed down a little in the last few years. I think Intel started producing new chips every other year back in 16. But it's been pretty significant up until then. And for me, that's entirely impactful because I look at, in the 10 years since I was in Mike Pettit's job as the director of IT for the county, that means computer power has increased by 2,000, a factor of 2,000. So that tells you just in one decade what that means. And it shows itself in a myriad of places. And why this is important is because it allows those that are developing technology, things such as broadband and computer chips and capabilities, to begin designing things that the current generation of computers they're working to design them on can't even run. An example of that is the new iPhone 10 and the neural network on that chip and facial recognition software. When that was just a developing product back a number of years ago, there was no technology platform that could run that capability. But yet they were designing it because they knew the technology would be there in the 3 to 4 years it came out into production. And that is in fact the case, and I'm in line for an iPhone 10 and hopefully it will deliver on that. At the county, we have a myriad of technology. We have robotic surgery now. You might have read that in the paper. We have the latest rated Da Vinci product. And if you ever had a chance to test drive that, it's a pretty amazing simulator they have, which is a full Da Vinci. We have UAVs. We have UAVs that both pilot themselves for search and rescue, and then we have UAVs that go underground as bulldozers to basically clean out and are completely remotely piloted. In our public works direction, we have autonomous UAVs that they program the UAV for mapping and then they leave it alone and it goes out and it does the things and it comes back in an hour and it's mapped a field or mapped a terrain. And it's amazing what you can do that you couldn't have done a number of years ago.
And then there's this whole thing called the Internet of Things. How many of you have heard that term, right? Well, the Internet of Things is amazing. Personally, for me, what it means is my refrigerator, the remodel I'm doing, is actually going to connect to the Internet. I'm going to be able to monitor the temperature, make sure my beer's cold at the right temperature when I get home. I'm going to be able to look inside and see what I need, and it'll actually order things for me. And that's just one device on the Internet. And the head of Cisco Systems last June in an interview on CNET, I believe it was, predicted that there'll be 1 million new devices attached to the Internet. 1 million every hour by 2020. We had to double check that figure. It's just amazing to me. 1 million new Internets of things, but as long as I get my refrigerator to keep my beer cold. A couple of other facts that are amazing about how fast technology is moving. More smartphones were sold last year than toothbrushes. 7.2 billion versus 4.1 billion. Right? Yeah. There were 50, about 3 or 4.
That's a stat.
There were 50 billion selfies uploaded on Google Photos last year. 50 billion. How many of you have photos on Google Photos? So one of the things that they all have in common, all this technology has in common, is the need for bandwidth. And broadband is the superhighway of the Internet. Whether it's phoning home, whether it's backing themselves up, whether it's you communicating with your device remotely, without broadband, we're lost. And without broadband, a community is disadvantaged, both economically, socially, and unfortunately, socioeconomically. And at our last, one of our initial, the county is introducing for the first time ever economic vitality strategic plan. And one of the areas where we all agreed, well, that there was a difference of opinion on what priorities were necessary in the county. But one thing everybody agreed upon was that broadband and the need for high-speed communications in every household, regardless of socioeconomic status, every business was absolutely necessary. And so it's an area we all agree upon, and you're in the right place at the right time to talk more on that topic. So with that, I have the opportunity to just take a moment and introduce our keynote speaker for this morning, and that's Jackie Rowan, Assembly member from the 44th District. And most of you, if not all of you, know Jackie. She was elected in 2014 to represent the 44th District, which encompasses most of Ventura County. And she knows what she speaks about in the field of technology. Broadband, cybersecurity, research, and innovation are critical to her. She chairs the Assembly Select Committee on Cybersecurity, and she co-chairs the National Conference of State Legislators Task Force on Cybersecurity. And these roles have allowed her to really have a voice and a leading position in national and statewide efforts to improve our cybersecurity policies. Very timely. Prior to her public service, Jackie worked for Teledyne Systems and is an engineer at Johns Hopkins University Applied Physics Lab. I did not know that. And so again, she speaks from where from a place of knowledge when it comes to technology. In her first term, she successfully brought home significant and numerous funding to the local county and passed significant laws and legislation, one of which increased the cybersecurity of our state agency. She's been honored as the Assembly Member of the Year by TechNet, the Woman of the Year by the Greater Conejo Valley Chamber of Commerce, the Champion for College Opportunity and Student Success by the Campaign for College Opportunity, and she received the Golden Bear Award for her service to the California National Guard. Jackie holds a Bachelor of Science in Systems Engineering in UC San Diego. And another fact I didn't know, she was an All-American swimmer all 4 years while she was at the university and competed at the national level. So with that, she, as a quote from one of my most favorite movies, you don't have to salute Jackie, but you do have to listen to her, because our national and state leaders listen to her when it comes to technology. So Jackie.
Matter of fact, this week we held a hearing on the pipeline in cybersecurity, and Mike Pettit came up to Sacramento to testify. He's quite an expert, and that's one of the things this county does so well, is so many people work together, there's so much knowledge, just great expertise. And I'll be talking about broadband, because that's obviously why you're here, but I do want to just, when we're talking about technology, I do want to put in my little plug for security, cybersecurity. So I have two really quick things. We always talk about, you hear these big issues of these breaches that happened at Sony and that happened at OPM. And so far it's always been the weakest link. So it's the person sitting at the computer. And so I tell everybody, make sure that you are not the weakest link. And we have some tips that we give out about making sure, like how many of you have Gmail? Do all of you use Gmail? All right, how many have done two-step authentication on your Gmail? Okay, we have a few people there. How many people make sure that they always update their software? See, we have some knowledge here. We have some tips that our office is putting out about how to make sure that your location services only the apps that need location services are turned on, and making sure that you update your software, and making sure you do two-step authentication, making sure that you always change your password. So I have to give that little tip, and then the one thing that's in everybody's mind also is the big Equifax breach, and what basically all the organizations, news organizations and cybersecurity organizations have said is that it's absolutely essential that you lock down your accounts with the 3 security agencies. The bad guys have your social security numbers now, and what you'll see 2 months down the road, 2 years down the road, 10 years down the road, that they're going to start opening accounts in your name. And so until we find some other way of identifying besides social security numbers, make sure that you call up those 3 agencies or go online and lock down your accounts, and then you can go to annualcreditreport.com and check to make sure that your reports are still clean. And last week I checked the statistics on how many people had already locked down their credit, and it's only 1% of all Americans, and this is affecting at least a third of all Americans. So if any of you would like our little tips on what to do, either how to make your phone safer, or about what the steps you need to take to protect yourself against the breach, please contact Andrew. He has my card, and we're happy to mail you, give you an electronic version of our two information brochures. When many of us hear the term broadband, we immediately think of a technical term focusing on the speed rather than what it brings to our residents. In decades past, it may have been useful to focus only on increasing speeds and getting past that drone of a modem while dialing up AOL. But what we should think of when we hear about broadband is access to opportunity. Broadband internet is now a basic foundational tool for Californians to live a prosperous life. Education, employment, and even entertainment are now almost entirely dependent upon your access to quality broadband. It is our responsibility as civic leaders, industry professionals, and stakeholders to learn about the issues limiting our residents' access to broadband and to find ways to improve our infrastructure. And that's why I'm glad that you are all here today. And I'm excited that we will learn more by the end of this event and be willing to step up to take action. Among the things we're going to learn today, or rather have reinforced, are just how far-reaching, fast-changing, and critical to our lives broadband is. Every one of us relies on cell phones and the internet. High-speed communication increasingly touches our lives on routine activities at home, watching TV, streaming music, asking Alexa to order more toilet paper, improving access to healthcare, how our fire and police professionals keep us safe, and how we educate our children. All of those things, those of us in this room already take for granted. But for many in our community, access to these tools is not always certain, and for many it's a heavy economic burden. While looking at the past 5 years of broadband access, there's been consistent growth, but it's been almost entirely due to the proliferation of smartphones with internet browsing capability. If we were to look at the percentage of our population with traditional computer-based access to broadband, we would see that we have flatlined. It is these trends that we need to recognize and ask questions about to make sure we are supporting the necessary programs and changes to be truly competitive as a region in an era in which this technology is changing so quickly. Before we can reach our goal of broadband access, we have work to do. We need to know where we stand today. Thanks to some local research, we know that we are barely keeping up. We need to know about what are best practices that we might borrow. And we also need to know what is the nature of our local talent and the resources upon which we can build. We need to build out our local and regional strategies for assuring our competitiveness. And with that agenda that we have today, I am confident that we can accomplish these things today. Thank you again for being here today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from all our speakers.
Thank you very much, Assemblymember Irwin. And I know from my perspective, I've never had the opportunity to work with a more driven Assemblymember on technology, on privacy, on cybersecurity, but from the heart of what matters, what's important with the use of this technology to our economy, to lives, as she talked about, with social equality, et cetera. And so it's fantastic to have such a strong advocate in our district here in Ventura County. So I love this quote. This is from Charles F. Kettering, and this, to me, really defines why we're here today, because we should be very concerned about the future because we're going to be spending the rest of our life there. And broadband is changing our world. High-speed internet is changing our world. And Matt Carroll talked about this a little bit, that in just the last 10 years, we've seen tremendous change in technology. And that has had profound impacts on our world. Who knew that we would have the Google self-driving car? Who knew that Amazon, just this last year, became the largest fashion retailer in the US? So pause and think about that, the largest fashion retailer. Industry analysts never thought that people would buy their clothes online. They thought that retail would always be necessary. People want to go in stores and try it on. That is proven to be completely the opposite. And we have drones. Matt talked a little bit about that. I have a slide. I'll show you some of the stuff that we're doing at the county, and smartphones. So our world has changed profoundly in just 10 short years. And so what does that mean for the 10 years ahead of us? And that's the reason we're here today. If we don't plan for that future, we will succumb to it. This is a picture of the robots that we have in our hospitals today at the county. We have the robot on the right, which is saving individuals' lives. It channels in a neurologist for individuals that are exhibiting symptoms of a stroke. And there's a short window of time that a medication can be administered to an individual having a stroke that has a profoundly positive impact on their life and can diminish the impacts of a stroke if they're properly diagnosed and the medication is administered. So we have these neurologists on immediate call with the robot, because you can imagine these specializations are more rare, and they can now be in multiple hospitals within a short period of time. We've taken that transportation time out of the equation by putting them in multiple locations all at once. And of course the Da Vinci surgery technology as well. We use, as Matt talked about, some autonomous vehicles now at the county. 10 years ago, we wouldn't have even dreamed of this, but we have the skid steer on the lower right that is cleaning out our watershed all autonomously, remotely. We have UAVs that we're using for fire protection and getting eyes on perimeters and being for fire resource allocation, and even in our public safety. We had a situation with a individual that was held up in a facility a couple of years ago, and the sheriff's unit rolled out their UAV. And when they announced to the individual held up in the facility who was refusing to come out, they announced that they were sending in the UAV, and the individual surrendered because he thought that the UAV was an armed UAV. We don't have that, but that's a story of how this technology is saving lives. This is some of the mobile technology that our employees use, our paramedics and our police officers in the field. So we have some of the most advanced tools for our employees, because over 50% of our workforce is in the field, and we want them to be applying their skills right there where they can be the most effective. But not to be outdone, technology is disrupting many, many different industries. This is an example of a pop song that was written by artificial intelligence. So if you are a die-hard musician, beware that your career may be in jeopardy. This song has had over 1 million views, listen-tos online. So you can go listen to it. I've listened to the song. I don't personally care for it. It's in the style of the Beatles, but in my opinion, the AI just didn't nail it for me. So
Yeah.
this is an actual website that you can go to and ask it if a robot will take your job. That's how far we've come in 10 years. So all of you might write that down and start career planning. And just to also provide a profound view of how technology is changing our world. This is a Maasai tribesman in the Serengeti. And you might ask, well, what is he doing with a cell phone? Well, this has changed their world. He happens to be a goat herder, and this has changed their world in being able to get their products to market. They have to travel miles upon miles to get their goats to the highest paying market. So they're using cell phones now to communicate with the network so that they can get their products to the highest paying market in their area. I was at a conference where this story was being told about this tribe and how they operate. So they have cell phones throughout their tribe, and once a week there's a young child in the village will collect up all the cell phones and go to a nearby town where they will recharge them all, and then they bring them back to the village. So the point here is that technology is extending to all reaches of our world and having a profound impact. And as has been said, broadband is the underlying foundation for all of these things. So when we talk about broadband, what do we mean? High-speed internet access that's available everywhere, always, at any time. And we really also mean that it's above even our state definition of broadband by the CPUC is 6 megabit download. If you're familiar with those numbers, that's barely enough to stream Netflix video. So when we talk about broadband, we're talking of speeds in excess really of even the federal standard of broadband, which is 25 megabits download and 5 megabit upload, and really more towards what you're going to hear about in a little bit, which is gigabit speeds. So how are we doing in California? This is the national broadband map, and it's pretty striking if you look at that. The East Coast tends to be well blanketed by multiple providers at higher speeds. And then unfortunately in California, we appear to be a desert. This could arguably be our water map as well. But we're challenged here in the state of California more closely in our region. So the Broadband Consortium here, the Pacific Coast Broadband Consortium, we commissioned a broadband study of our region, San Luis Obispo County and San Luis Obispo County. And it was done on a residential grading scale with a GPA type rating. And you can see the definitions of the different grades. C being average defines that you have at least one provider advertising max download speeds of 10 megabits. And the remainder meeting our CPUC's definition of 6 megabits. And so we, as you can see, overall in our region, average about a C grade. And I don't think that any of us in the room are happy with a C. Looking at the impact of that. So this is a quote from the recently retired Chief Technology Officer of our Ventura County Office of Education. And he shared with us this story of students in some of our schools driving to the school parking lot to use the school's internet access after hours because they simply didn't have access to internet at home. And that can be for multiple reasons, both from an adoption and cost perspective, but also from an availability perspective. In the commercial industry, the broadband study that we commissioned used a star rating. Again, a 3-star rating is considered average with basic infrastructure at the 6 megabit down, 1.5 megabit up level. And you can see throughout our region we have low marks in our commercial broadband infrastructure. What does that mean? This is Shane Prukop. He's a second-generation businessman in Ventura, in the city of Ventura. He works, his facility is off of DuPont. That's in a commercial zone of the city of Ventura. And Shane has a manufacturing business that heavily relies on computer-aided design. And he has been unable to get broadband to his facility. And the challenge that he has is he has a long-term lease on this facility. And the cost to get broadband to his facility is more than his small business can afford. There's a one-time cost of getting the last mile of connectivity to his facility, and then the monthly cost is more than his small business can afford. So this is just a small example of the profound impact that broadband access and availability has on small business, which we've all heard and understand to be the fuel of our economy. So now to share with you about the possibilities of a highly enabled city with broadband, I want to invite Rick Usher up. Rick Usher is the Assistant City Manager for Kansas City, Missouri. And Kansas City, if you follow the news, was successful in their bid for Google Fiber. And Rick was, in his role with the city, he oversees entrepreneurial business development throughout the city. And he was instrumental in helping bring Google to the city of Kansas City. And they've seen some profound impacts to their region as a result. And so what you're going to hear from Rick is what the possibilities of the future are. So please join me in welcoming Rick.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you for inviting me out to talk with you. This experience has been pretty amazing for me in the city. I haven't had a project like this that has really allowed me to travel coast to coast to share what's been happening. And okay, that's a good slide. Our Google, I'll give you a quick background on just how we got where we are with Google, but in 2010 when their RFI came out, we had our startup community actually started filling out the application before we knew about it at City Hall. This is a co-working space called Office Port. At the time it was one of maybe a handful of co-working spaces we had in Kansas City. And I was assigned to go down and meet with this group, and jumping back up to May of 2011, Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri were announced as receiving the Google Fiber Award. At that time it was an experiment to see what gigabit internet speeds would be like. This is a billboard that the Coffee Foundation put together for us. We also, I didn't bring one, but we had coffee mugs made for our final development agreement negotiations, and that helped us seal the deal. It is a regional deployment. This is our Mayor Sly James on the left, and then Mayor of Kansas City, Kansas, Wyandotte County, Joe Reardon, at the Kansas City, Missouri's announcement of Google Fiber. They created the Mayor's Bi-State Innovation Team. So that led to playbook. I got a timeline that's going to pop up here. Our response time, first call, our negotiations, and then the announcement. The Mayor's Bi-State Innovation Team, though, brought thought leaders in technology, education, small business, usage together. They created a playbook and created an organization we call KC Digital Drive. So it sounds like it's very parallel to your broadband consortium, and we can get together later on more ways we could collaborate. But these are some other high points of the project. It was an experiment until December 2012 when Eric Schmidt said it's no longer an experiment, we're operating it as a business. So we feel like, and when I talk to startups, they're all concerned about how we'll help them prove their business model, show that it's viable, show that it's marketable, and now we can point to Google and say, well, they weren't a broadband service provider. We helped them, we created the market in Kansas City for them to be able to prove gigabit speed internet as a viable business model. It also, Google's push was to change the conversation nationally to be about gigabit speed internet rather than, at that time, I think the broadband plan called for 10 megabit per second upload speeds. So this is kind of the construction timeline. By the end of 2014, Google had built out what they call the Kansas City plant, the city limits of Kansas City, Missouri. In the metropolitan area, there's a population of, say, 2 million. Kansas City, Missouri is 480,000. Kansas City, Kansas is about 167,000 people. We took Google's deployment maps versus our Census Bureau information on population and found that Google Fiber is available to over 210,000 households in Kansas City, Missouri. They don't share subscriber data, none of the ISPs do, but we know by this and then some other means just how available that is throughout the region. That's interesting. So the economic impacts, that's really what we're here for today. And we recognized that faster internet add value, and especially that being identified by our entrepreneurial community. Kaufman Foundation is based in Kansas City, Missouri. They're a global nonprofit supporting entrepreneurship and education. What we saw through these interactions was the foundation take a focus locally on entrepreneurship. So they started a Wednesday morning program called 1 Million Cups. 2 startups come in and pitch their idea. It started as a very small group. Actually, it was a smaller group than this in the beginning. And now we're organizing into 2, sometimes 300 people, depending on who the speakers are and what the events are. But it has been a great way to connect people in our startup community. We had 4 or 5 years ago startups that would say it was taking me 6 months or a year to figure out how to plug into the startup community. And now with 1 Million Cups, you just say, Wednesday morning at 9, and you show up and connect with the community. So as Google Fiber was built out, of course, everyone's trying to figure out where it was going to go first, and our startup community is looking for this because the opportunities for home-based business and entrepreneurship with gigabit speed internet are being proven really in Kansas City now through these organizations. But at 45th and State Line Road, and serendipitously it's right on the state line. One side of the street I'm in Kansas, the other side of the street I'm in Missouri, and that again kind of helped on that regional unity thing. But several entrepreneurs found themselves just in the right spot. Matthew Marcus had inherited a house from his mom that she had converted to an antique store. He turned that into a startup co-working space. Adam Arredondo, another entrepreneur in the neighborhood, came in. There was a guy, Ben Barrett, who opened what he called the Home for Hackers, where you pitch your business idea and he gives you 3 months free rent to come and see what you can develop with your gigabit speed internet. He also had like a tech tourism room that he put on Airbnb, so we had international travelers that would come through to check out the speeds. On the deployment side, and then digital inclusion, digital equity that we highlighted a couple of times here. In Kansas City, we have a long history of segregation and racial tensions, and in Kansas City, Truce Avenue is the geographic boundary that typically, there's the phrase Eastern Truce that unfortunately for a long time had negative connotations. And what Google did was make that front page news. And when they did their marketing, they used neighborhood identities that came from our planning department. So I live on the west side, so they had a west side fiber hood, and they were like an Ivanhoe fiber hood in my neighborhood. So in our development agreement, they provided us with 300 free community connections for schools, libraries, community centers, and government buildings. And so in the marketing, they would say, if the west side turns green, reaches our sign-up thresholds, then Rui's Library will get gigabit connectivity. Fire Station 10 will get gigabit connectivity. So what was happening though is affluent neighborhoods west of Troost Avenue, as you can see on the left here, turned green almost within 3 or 4 days. And what was required to sign up is internet access to get to the website, credit card to post your $10 to say you're interested in subscribing. And when you go to the east side, you know, people run banked, people run credit cards, and people didn't subscribe to internet services. So it was quite a cultural clash between Google's staff that are really not only tech savvy but tech dependent, meeting folks who saw no need for it and really didn't see the relevance of being online. So KC Digital Drive's leader, Aaron Deacon, launched a crowdfunding campaign he called Paint the Town Green. To get people to donate the $10. He had prepaid debit cards, school principals, community center leaders, neighborhood leaders went door to door. And by the end of the campaign, our neighborhoods, and the majority of them east of Troost, had reached those sign-up thresholds. Google also had to do some analysis of the households because, unfortunately, we also have a vacant housing problem. And so there were a lot of households that they thought might have subscribers that were basically empty. We're about 90% of the way through an 800 building demolition list that we've been working on for about 2 years. That effort, I think I got another slide on our digital equity plan I'll talk about, but on the entrepreneurial side, our Chamber of Commerce recognized that now we have this opportunity to make Kansas City America's most entrepreneurial city. So we're seeing business community support, and we're seeing lots of efforts to support the startup community. And these are some construction photos. When this happens, if you are out and decide to build a gigabit network, then you need a lot of communication with neighborhoods, because depending on whether you're overhead or underground, you're going through neighborhoods 2 or 3 times, and it's kind of like the railroad days. It's hell on wheels. That you have these crews that are going through your neighborhoods with their boring machines, and maybe a week on your street that there's a bit of construction disruption. So part of my job was staying ahead of the crews to tell them who they need to alert that they're coming and how they need to coordinate schedules. The photo top right is one of our premier shopping districts in Kansas City, the Country Club Plaza. They came in unannounced and brought their boring conduit and the mud that they use to across the sidewalks, that were disrupting customers. So that was an interesting day. This is the deployment map today. This one, and this shows this came off Google's website, and this demonstrates that the Kansas City region today is a bi-state gigabit region, where 21 cities in the metro area now all have agreements with Google Fiber. It's been constructed in the majority of those cities, and as I was saying, in Kansas City, Missouri, we know there's maybe 210,000 households that are passed. We're about 1/3 of the metro area, so there's quite a few. Obviously, there's a lot of gigabit connectivity available. The other fun thing has been the incumbent ISP's reactions. AT&T, Time Warner Spectrum, Comcast, and today we have AT&T building their gigabit internet speeds. Unfortunately, only in the affluent neighborhoods. So they're working on the Johnson County side, Overland Park, Kansas area. They're working in Kansas City's Northland. But we have, I was looking at your scoring or your grading of metros. I think we have 4 competing ISPs. And so Spectrum and Comcast are kind of in a bargaining mode where they up their minimum speeds to 300 megabit download, kind of at no charge to their standard tier customers. And you get these mailers that, you saw kind of the news that Google's backpedaling a bit on their full nationwide expansion. So Spectrum will send mailers out. Are you upset Google's leaving Kansas City? Come back to us. So there's this bargaining that's going on. But what has been amazing, and what I think you're trying to harness here, is this groundswell of community action that will come out. These are a number of organizations that have started after the Google Fiber announcement or amplified their efforts in broadband and digital connectivity. We have Launch KC here is one of the organizations that does a startup grant competition. Since Google Fiber's announcement, we have the Digital Sandbox, Launch KC, Techstars, the Sprint Accelerator. They've partnered to bring companies to Kansas City. So we can attribute over 200, and that might be a conservative number, companies that are starting or come to Kansas City due to these efforts. It's hard to quantify. We were talking yesterday, and I've got another slide I'll talk about in a minute, but how you really put a number behind the ROI for the city's waiver of permitting fees and other incentives that we offer Google to come to the investment that they made. This is just a fun slide I like to put up here. Again, that we assisted in the business model. But what it's leading to for us, and I think your county administrator talked about the Internet of Things, is the smart city movement. And our mayor, Sly James, created an Office of Innovation when he took office. Chief Innovation Officer today, Bob Bennett, is now participating in 5 or 6 global smart city initiatives. We've built what Bob claims to be the largest smart city footprint in North America, 50 blocks of free public Wi-Fi, traffic sensors, pedestrian sensors and counters, parking availability, sensing, and we have a water main break detection product we're working on, and a pothole predictor. All of this data, first thing we had to develop was our privacy policy and our data sharing policies, and then we created the digital, what do we call it, the Living Lab. The Living Lab is entrepreneurs can come in to get access to that data and start trying to develop products from that. So Bob will say, you're not a smart city until you're actually using the data from your smart city sensors in decision making on government services and other products in the region. We built a 2.2 mile streetcar line. That system sits in the middle of this smart city deployment. We're working with our area transportation authority on what's called Prospect Max. It's a BRT line that will go down Prospect Avenue, which is in the major commercial corridor through one of our more economically distressed neighborhoods. So we're looking at deploying that smart city initiative there and bringing some digital equity components with that program. This, as far as how Google Fiber has jump-started our startup community, these are some numbers from UMKC's Innovation Center and KC SourceLink, they've been able to track a 290% increase in available capital for entrepreneurs since this 2013 number. And there are a number of efforts regionally now to create venture capital funds and help entrepreneurs grow in Kansas City. Another slide on our smart city initiatives. This slide comes from Google's 3.5 megahertz wireless test they conducted. This is kind of where things are going now, of course, is toward wireless deployment. This is a slide they put up at our city council presentation on approval of that agreement. We competed for their business initially, and then by having that gigabit network built, they were able to deploy off of that and paid us this nice compliment that they're recognizing us as a technology and innovation leader and excellent partner on innovation. And this is leading to small cell attachment. As we're looking at wireless deployment, and wireless is not an alternative to fiber. Wireless is fiber dependent. So we're seeing, we've got 8 small cell pole attachment agreements with different providers, Sprint, Verizon, the most recent. We're working with AT&T right now. T-Mobile is looking at a deployment. We're finding ways to partner with them on these deployments to really push our smart city initiatives citywide. So they're attaching to our assets, and then and we call it pole attachment, it really is pole replacement. They replace the pole to support their small cell antenna, and then we can ask them to put additional outlets, say on top of the street light, that we can use to put our IoT devices on. In the future, we don't know what they might be right now, but we know they need power. So there's some opportunity that we're working on there. And then lastly, I'll turn on our Amazon and KC bid, but if anybody was following Mayor James on Twitter yesterday, he started our hashtag KC 5 stars, where he bought 1,000 products on Amazon for local charities, and then in the reviews, pulled the Kansas City twist into them, like, this flashlight's really cool, and while we're talking about shining the light on something, take a look at Kansas City. We'll see where that goes, but the hashtag's been trending. I'm not sure nationally or whether it's got their attention at Amazon headquarters on their word cloud, but we're trying to push that in. But in our response, digital connectivity is one that we've made a very strong point about, that we can provide that. And with the 50,000 employee base they're looking at building over the next 10 years, they can live virtually anywhere in the region and have gigabit connectivity to the office. Low latency really reduces that digital commute. It allows them to do business resilience planning. There's a lot of things we're trying to define now that are unfortunately a bit foreign to our business community, but we think that Amazon will understand that. What else we got there? So yeah, I covered that issue. So that's what's happening in Kansas City, and I'm happy to be here. And any questions later? Is that?
Well, real quick, we have time for about 5 questions. If any of you have specific questions for Rick before we move on in the program. Again, so Kansas was able to accomplish, I'm going to say Kansas City, Missouri. There's a big competition there if you've ever been there. Was able to accomplish gigabit coverage to most all of their communities. I think Rick was sharing with us yesterday that they implemented over 3 million route miles of fiber.
Actually, it's a good number to look at the number, 5.5 million. It's not just Google though. That's all service providers, commercial, residential, across the region. 5.5 million miles of fiber.
So that's a considerable amount of fiber.
So since the Google program started, how many, what percentage of businesses have grown in Kansas City and employment gone down? How has it affected the economy locally besides gearing them up for a better platform to work with?
That's the difficult question to answer, and thank you, because I was going to point that out on this slide as well. In Amazon's RFP, they're very clear. We're going to invest $8 billion in your community. We're going to bring 50,000 jobs over this time frame. And in traditional economic development, you can generate the numbers on all of that to answer your question. On Google's deployment, it's not as easy a question to answer. One, because they haven't told us what the investment was. But we know, in talking to some industry experts, that for the Kansas City, Missouri piece, it's in the $300 million range. I know from managing our technical committee that there were 1,000 construction jobs. And then, of course, there's the team at their outside plant running the network. But what we're trying to show from, like I have a slide for the investment capital increases. KC Sourcing also does a We Create report on job creation by startup companies. And it's also kind of a program that you're going to see is cross-cutting through the community. It affects, school, libraries. It helps you order your beer from your refrigerator, and it provides this platform for government services. The other nice thing about that, if we get to this point where all residents are connected, then providing government services and getting citizen feedback. One thing we do a good job of in Kansas City is citizen satisfaction surveys and using that data to guide initiatives. We just passed an $800 million general obligation bond package for infrastructure because of the analysis of data that citizens have provided on projects that they wanted to see. But, yes, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned symmetric gigabit internet, and I believe that means equal upload and download speeds. And how's that been working out, and does that apply to both business and residential?
It does apply to both business and residential. They advertise it really as speeds up to. It was funny, at a neighborhood meeting, there was a guy who said, well, I'm going to pay them up to $70 a month. Based on, but I've seen, like with my connections at home, and probably all of us are more using our Wi-Fi networks than directly connected, but directly connected to Google Fiber. My son does that. He does some programming, but we're consistently over 800 symmetrically, and the download is a bit faster. But you can Wi-Fi with I'm not sure which iPhone I have, but I'm getting over 100 symmetrically through our Wi-Fi. Yes, sir.
I understand the economic development impact. Was the city able to own any of the network that they built out? Was there any negotiations for having the city own some of that fiber network for emergency operations or connectivity between public buildings?
We have, in the development agreement, we received 300 community connections, which are these gigabit connections. They're not to be used for like primary operations, but our IT department, really we've built kind of our own more robust private network. We're working with Unite, is they're a national company, but they're connecting a lot of our facilities. We've been using these community connections at community centers, and I mentioned library, schools. We recently, we're wrapping up that list, so we had a good number available. We made available to nonprofits that are working in digital inclusion. So we're providing 24 nonprofits with free gigabit connectivity. So that answer your question?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, so this is off topic a little bit. On your entrepreneurial effort for Kansas City, how long have you been doing this, and how many jobs do you think you have created because of it?
The job creation we do have a report. Unfortunately, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but what this report showed was that startups and small businesses, you know, are the job creators in Kansas City. So we have some strong information on that. As far as how long the city has been supporting entrepreneurship and small business, I was fortunate to be able to define the position that I have today. We have had small business support efforts like on permitting and construction related issues, land development related issues. And our Economic Development Corporation, again, is kind of focused on bricks and mortar development. But it really was Google Fiber, you know, building this network that changed the attitude of City Hall. So now we're focusing on the success of those businesses that come into those new buildings or facilities. And our Economic Development Corporation, business development officers are running that Launch KC program. So they're getting the local support dollars. They're running the competition in partnership with our downtown council. It's a large business association. And we award 10 startups $50,000 to $100,000 every year. We just announced that at Tech Week in September. We've been doing that for 3 years. But my position as Assistant City Manager of Small Business and Entrepreneurship is about 3 years old, 4 years old. Yes, sir.
Do you have a sense of what the bandwidth utilization is throughout the project rollout?
No. That's part of what comes up is, you know, what do you do that requires gigabit speed? And is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well,
Like,
yeah.
If I have gigabit, how much of that bandwidth am I really using?
210,000 households at gigabit speeds. What's the peak bandwidth utilization to the drain?
Yeah, not being like the owner of the network, I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry, okay.
Go ahead, you're right.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So, in one of your slides, you talked about Spectrum, a legacy cable company. You inferred that you saw pricing pressure and higher speeds and competition in response to competition from Google. Has that really helped out your community?
I think it has. I mean, we know from, well, we're part of Next Century Cities, we're part of the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and as you showed in this community rating system, you have more competition is valuable to the community. Spectrum just recently, I think, took over, merged with Time Warner, and I think they've actually lowered prices on some of their lower speed offerings. They have a $14.99 package. But just the fact that they just went up to 300 download. We have a website I was showing Mike earlier that one of our smart city partners put together for us that gives you a data visualization of the FCC Form 477 data on maximum advertised upload download speeds by internet service provider in your community. And we map that against poverty and economic information. And through that, you can see that through most of our neighborhoods, AT&T might have 5 or 8 or 10 download speeds, and you know, 1 or 2 or 3 upload speeds tied to that. Spectrum Time Warner is consistently 300 download, 20 upload, and then Google Fiber is consistently symmetric gigabit in the majority of our neighborhoods. AT&T and some of our more affluent neighborhoods are building their gigabit speed network. But it's a highly searched item on real estate sites, whether Google Fiber is available at a house for sale. I know I'm strangely in the last 5 years have moved 3 times in the city limits, and when I go look at a house, the first thing I do is go to the basement and look for the fiber jack.
Smart man.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rick. Rick will be here after we wrap up the summit in case you have any other questions for him. So one of the things that you've heard a few of our speakers talk about this morning is the Internet of Things. And you heard the quote from Matt Carroll about the CEO of Cisco. If you're not familiar with Cisco, they're one of the leading network equipment manufacturers in the world. In fact, probably most all of us use on a daily basis part of their network equipment for our internet access. So the quote that he stated was just recently in an interview in June that over 1 million devices, internet connected devices, will be added each hour beginning in 2020. It's hard to believe, hard to comprehend, but that is the world of the Internet of Things, the connected device world that we are quickly heading towards. And so we have a speaker that you're going to hear from in a moment, but first we want to show a quick video that kind of paints a picture of what that world may look like and some of the benefits associated with that.
I don't know how you're supposed to feel at 86, but I don't think I feel like I'm 86.
What's up, Brooklyn?
People make my world go round. I fear isolation and being cut off. If I am alone somewhere and I have no one to talk to, no one to share anything with, I bet you I would just dry up and go away. I call this my smart house. We got sensors in all the rooms. I swallow them. I wear them. Doc knows what's going on with me. I don't have to go to the clinic anymore. I call him up. He's not back in the horse and buggy days.
Looks like you had a pretty active week, huh?
Feeling it too. Hey guys, how do you like it? Knowing I got eyes on me gives me the confidence to keep me being who I am. Doing what I want to do frees me up. Takes some worry away. I don't have to worry about Paige, my daughter. Hey kiddo, what's up?
I'm just checking in.
Because I know she's not worried about me. She's always busy, work and kids, but she can see exactly how I'm doing.
I love you, Dad.
That she knows how I feel before I do. Cookie has become my buddy.
Diaper refill, Jim?
My wingman. Hey, Cookie, what time is that car going to be here?
2 minutes. It's cold out. Might want to bring a coat.
It's like he has a brain. Now, what are you doing, Cookie?
It's a quick...
I have come to rely on him. I know I can trust him, and he's got my back. I lost Ellen, my wife, 10 years ago. So many good times, so many memories. Losing her was really tough. If we had for her then what we have for me now, she would have been in a much better place. I miss her so much. Here, not too long ago, I was experiencing those dizzy spells. The doctor had provided a scan for me at home, so I didn't have to go out to the clinic or anything.
They have those scans for that patient. Take a look.
And that scan revealed that I had an aneurysm. I saw this specialist, a surgeon, and she explained to me, we wouldn't have a messy operation. They inject these nanobots, they go into your system, and they find where the aneurysm is, and they seal it off. I get a kick out of thinking that I have a whole bunch of nanobots swimming around up here in my brain, doing what they're supposed to do. I wasn't in a hospital. I was back home. I was back home where I want to be, where I belong. The help that I have allows me to stay here in my home. Who is that? You remember? The guy in the back. Who is that? Have my friends here. That's Pete. My family. And I don't want to give that up. I don't want to be in a nursing home. The quickest way to lose your independence is to go where you don't have any independence. That's the truth.
Pretty powerful. And when you look at the technologies in that video, we are using many of them today. We have Google Glasses and other types of glasses for augmented reality. We have sensors. We have autonomous driving vehicles. The thing I love about that video is it paints a future that doesn't seem that bad. There is a lot of uncertainty about technology, but there's a tremendous amount of benefit and profound impact to individuals' lives. So I'm excited about our next speaker. We're fortunate in this county to have some remarkable companies. And just probably a stone's throw away from here, we have a leading semiconductor manufacturer of IoT chips. And the company is called Semtech. And we're fortunate to have with us this morning Jack Ellis from Semtech. Jack is the Director of Worldwide Sales at Semtech. It's a leading company, semiconductor company, headquartered right here in Camarillo. And Jack oversees a team that manages the sales processes at Semtech and has been managing marketing and sales activities for leading analog semiconductor companies for over 20 years. Most recently, Jack has been charged to promote Semtech's LoRa, long-range radio IoT products, and that is what the Internet of Things is all about. So Semtech makes the technology that makes IoT communication possible. So please join me in welcoming Jack Ellis.
Morning, everybody. By day, I live in Westlake Village, and then I come over here to work at Semtech. Semtech is a $2.5 billion public corporation, trades on the NASDAQ. And they make not only IoT devices, but they also make the devices that enable broadband communications at companies, that provide those type of systems like Cisco. I've worked in the semiconductor space for almost 25 years, and I've worked at Semtech for over 11 years. And the one thing I can tell you is that the semiconductor companies get to see the trends before many others. We get approached by the trendsetters like Apple or Cisco or Google, because they want us to develop the products that are going to enable their next generation products. So with that said, let's start with IoT. So by 2020, depending on which research firm you subscribe to, somewhere between 20 billion and 30 billion connected IoT devices will be on the planet. Now, I don't have a calculator to figure out if that's the 1 million per hour, if that aligns with any of these, but at any rate, it's daunting. 3 to 4 IoT devices for every man, woman, and child on the planet. That's what this is saying. So I'm not sure everybody understands what IoT is. You have devices, you have machines. So it was, 20, 25 years ago that Al Gore invented the internet, and we all learned how to surf the web and create websites. Well, IoT, Internet of Things, is very similar, but it's the machines talking to one another rather than people. Internet for people, now you got internet for machines. The sensor, you put these machines out in the field, they collect data, send it up to the cloud. The cloud might have a program that processes the data and then tells other machines what to do with that data. Like you might have, for instance, a soil moisture sensor says, ground is dry, program up in the cloud goes back down and tells the actuator to turn on the water valve and sprinkle the water on the ground. So that's what IoT is, just in case. And the term is smart, right? You see smart cities, smart homes, smart buildings, smart farms, smart factories. So let me give you kind of a little flavor of the magnitude of what we're talking about here. So at Centec, we see these opportunities all the time, different smart opportunities, and we're dealing with a company that puts these smart tags on cows and other livestock, monitoring heart rate, monitoring temperature, various things that give you the health of the cow, or even track the cow. Let's say it roamed off into somebody else's farm. Various things so that, if a cow is sick, you can separate it from the herd quicker, it's sick. Various things for different types of livestock. In fact, we have another, I just learned in our last sales conference that cows have 3 stomachs. And we have one company that's going to implant one of our LoRa devices onto a sensor into one of the stomachs, and it's going to monitor other health issues in the cow. And you might find this funny. I just learned this about there's a company we're working with in China that is putting a device on chickens to not only monitor the health, but to understand how many steps the chicken is taking. Because evidently in China, a healthy chicken goes for $25. And, I wouldn't work in the United States because, it's $5 at Costco to buy chicken. That's for the health of the chicken. More pertinent to this area, smart agriculture, soil farmers. Now, this doesn't really exist so much today, but it's coming. The farmers are going to have to make their farms to smart farms in order to stay competitive. One of the biggest expenses a soil farmer has is water, right? And so you're going to have soil moisture sensors, wireless soil moisture sensors, because you can't run wires out into the ground because you'll till the ground and cut up the wire, right? So you're going to have these wired soil moisture sensors, wireless, and they'll feed data to the cloud and then send back to the actuator to open up the valve. They also measure nitrogen levels and pH levels of the soil, so you know when to fertilize the soil to basically get optimal yields out of your crops. Everybody's going to have to move to this. It's not really prevalent so far today, other than at like hydroponic farms like Howlings over here. But it's going to happen, and it's going to happen soon. Smart cities. I'm not going to go through everything here, but you can just to see the magnitude. You're going to see parking sensors all over the place. Gunshot noise detector to improve the response times to firearm discharge. Would have been good at Las Vegas probably. Smart irrigation for the cities that have a lot of for parks and for county facilities. Waste management. We have companies that are working on devices that tell you whether a trash bin is full or not, and whether somebody actually has to go out there to empty the trash bin. Smart traffic lights to ease congestion, fire detection for cities, counties that have large wooded areas or parks, and then we're working with every major logistics company right now. Right now, when you send a package, you take it to the FedEx place and they scan it, right? And then it's at the FedEx place. And then when it goes on the truck, they scan it again. And when it goes on the plane, they scan it again. And that's how you know where the package is. Every time it gets scanned, you see the movement. Well, these logistics companies are all going to be moving towards inexpensive wireless trackers that will basically just be on your package. Nobody has to scan anything anymore. It's just you're gonna see it real time as it moves, from New York to Missouri or wherever. You can see it on the plane going wherever it is. And not only for improved tracking ability, but also how many times have you heard on the news where, you know, people's packages, maybe their holiday packages got stolen after the person, you know, sent it to, you know, left it on their doorstep? That type of stuff could go away because if somebody steals your package, we're still gonna know where it is. Smart homes, okay. So that previous video kind of stole my thunder, but you can see, I mean, I can envision very, very shortly every home having 20, maybe 100 sensors. I mean, imagine your garden, just soil moisture sensors. You probably have, you know, 10, 20 of those in your garden. And then security systems, fire detections, door locks, you mentioned smart refrigerators, leak detection. We're working with several companies, and consumers aren't going to necessarily pay for leak detections, but the insurance companies want people to have leak detection. So they'll end up reimbursing people to install these sensors in their homes. We had a board member of Semtech that recently had over $100,000 worth of water damage to one of his homes. And, you know, so the insurance companies, in order, I mean, they can reimburse you for a $400 device to, you put these sensors throughout your home, and when one of them detects a leak, sends a signal to an actuator that's over the water main valve in your home, and it turns it off before any significant water damage is done to your home. You saw health monitors. I mean, there could be 100 health monitors on every person, you know, in the near future. So just kind of gives you the magnitude of where this is all going, and all this is going to be requiring internet, more bandwidth, right? Okay, so that's all very impressive, but I think it was about 5 years ago, we had a sales meeting in Florida, and one of the senior executives from Cisco came out to tell us basically where bandwidth was going. And 5 years ago, he was saying that the bandwidth that we are using today is going to multiply by 10 5 years from now. And what's driving that is video. So let's talk a little bit about cord cutting. In 2015, paid TV subscribers through traditional outlets like cable and satellite decreased by 1.1 million users. 2016, it accelerated to 1.7 million users. In the first quarter of 2017, already 762,000 users cut the cord from cable or satellite. Now, are people just not entertaining themselves anymore? Not watching TV? I don't think so. You've probably all seen some sort of article about the average person watches more than 2 hours of TV each day. So where are they going? Well, so I don't have data on every TV over internet provider, but I do have two of the largest ones, Sling TV and DirecTV Now. And they added in the first quarter over 300,000 new subscribers. So you saw in the previous slide, the traditional guys lost 762,000. Almost half of those moved to these TV over internet type deals. Now, another big one is Hulu Live TV. I've seen recent advertisements from them, $40 per month for TV over internet. And this isn't stripped down TV necessarily. I mean, you don't get the 1,000 channels, you know, the duck hunting channel or whatever that you don't watch anyways. They're really, so for instance, myself, I cut the cord 1 month ago, 30 days ago approximately, and I was using Time Warner Cable, $170 a month. My wife and children have cell phones from AT&T, and AT&T was running a special, you know, you can bundle your cell phone with their internet package, which was going to be $30 a month, and then add on this DirecTV Now, which I think AT&T must own DirecTV Now. But it comes with about 60 channels. It's all the major networks, CBS, ABC, NBC, all the different sports channels, ESPN, all the news channels, CNBC, Fox News, everything. Anyways, all the pertinent channels, so you don't have to sift through the 1,000 channels, you just got the 60 that you watch anyways, right there. And it's $10 a month. So we ended up saving probably over $100 a month just switching, cutting the cord, and we think more people are going to do that. Now, not everybody moves to these internet, TV over internet deals, but a lot of them are doing the airwave thing. You buy your HD antenna, and then you supplement it with like a Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu. But you can see that this trend is happening. It's happening now. It's accelerating, and it's to save money, primarily I think. But but it also allows users to kind of customize what they're watching, right? All that's going to require broadband, right? Video is the biggest hog of bandwidth. But if that's not enough to convince you, look at this. So standard definition. Standard definition, most of the TV shows that you watched in the past were shot in standard definition. There's several different flavors of standard definition, but the most common one is 720 by 480 pixels per frame. And what that amounts to is 350,000 pixels per frame. I imagine everybody in this room has at least an HD TV. HD TV is 1920 by 1080 pixels, which is 2.1 million pixels per frame. That's 6 times the bandwidth needed as standard definition, 6 times. I don't know if you've ordered movies over the internet. We use Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime always pushes the HD movies every time we're looking to buy or rent. The first 2 buttons you can press is, buy an HD or buy or rent an HD. And then they've got this other button that's kind of off to the side saying more purchasing options, and that's where you can buy the SD version. But they're trying to push the higher bandwidth versions because they get more money off of that. Well, about 2 years ago, we started seeing 4K televisions roll off the assembly lines. And 4K televisions are 3,840 pixels by 2,160 pixels, 8.3 million pixels per frame. Now that's 23 times the bandwidth needed as standard definition. And those TVs are very prevalent today. You go to Costco, you'll see that they're also called UHD, ultra high definition. That's going to be one of the bigger TV selections that you're going to see today. More daunting than that is 8K TVs are now rolling off the assembly lines of Samsung, LG, and Sharp. Where we've got products in those TVs, and you're going to start seeing them during this holiday season, not to any large extent, but you can imagine 5 years from now, that's going to be the prevalent technology that you'll see in Costco and all the different Best Buy and that type of thing. Now, this isn't to say that there's going to be a whole lot of 8K content anytime soon, but you can imagine 5-10 years from now, there's going to be a lot of 8K content. And 8K is, let's see, 7,680 pixels by 4,320 pixels, 33.2 million pixels per frame, as opposed to 350,000 pixels per frame in standard definition. So almost 100 times the bandwidth required, right? And this is all coming. It's here. 10 years from now, there's going to be all the sports programs. It's going to be 8K. You're going to need 100 times the bandwidth of standard definition. And as more and more people convert from traditional infrastructure like cable and satellite and move to internet, that's where the bandwidth is going to be needed. Other uses. So it's not only your TVs, it's not only your entertainment. More and more people are working from home. I probably have 8 to 10 video conferences per week that I'm involved with. And video doorbells, we have a video doorbell at home. In fact, we had an intruder about 2 months ago in our backyard, wigged out my wife. She was freaked out. She's looking at all the different security companies, ADT, and I was thinking, great, $40 a month. But I convinced her that, you know, we'd just get a floodlight camera and put them in the 2 access areas, places that you can get into our yard. And what they do is it's got a motion detector, and it will, you know, so it turns on the camera and notifies you on your phone when somebody's entered that area. And she was convinced that would be good enough. And just recently, so I told you we cut the cord. We had the AT&T guy come out. Notification came on my phone. Somebody was in the side yard. I was able to talk to the guy from work, tell him this is what my internet configuration is at home, so you know exactly what to do. And scared the bejesus out of him, but it's just the kind of ability that you have. But the reason I point this out is right now these cameras are using lower definition technology, but as the 4K and the 8K components decrease in price, they're going to be integrated into these type of cameras, adding to the bandwidth requirements that we need. So, I guess we were talking about Moore's Law just a little while ago. Maybe there should be a bandwidth law or something, but I think you can all see. I mean, 5 years ago, Cisco was telling us bandwidth requirements were going to be 10x what they are today. 5 years from now, well, I'd say 5 years from now, probably another 10x is probably what we're looking at. You could probably see why. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jack. I'm curious, just by show of hands, a quick poll, how many of you have some kind of smart device at your home? So I would say that looks like at least 40% of the room, and that's today. So 10 years from now, I would hazard to guess that 100% of a room like this would raise their hand. And many of us probably have devices that we don't even realize that are connected in our homes, either from the gas company, if you have a smart meter, or electric company, smart meter on your home. Well, technology is all about disruption. We've seen a lot of disruption in the business world. You look at technology companies like Uber that have disrupted the transportation industry, Airbnb that's had a profound impact on vacation rentals, and even as many of you work in public service, it's been an issue in the disruption that's brought. So similarly, there is disruption in the telecommunications world. And so our next guest speaker is from another local company called GeoLinks, and they have an alternative solution to the last mile problem with broadband. If you're not familiar with what that is, fiber is what is needed to connect to provide high-speed internet capacity for long reach, long distance. But that last mile problem is getting that connectivity into each residence or business, and that's where the cost escalates in building the infrastructure. And so our next guest speaker is from a local company, again, within a stone's throw away of our location here today, called GeoLinks. Philip Deneve is the Chief Revenue Officer for this local company, GeoLinks, which is a wireless broadband provider. Under his leadership as the Chief Revenue Officer, GeoLinks was recently recognized by Inc. magazine as one of the top fastest growing companies in the U.S. Prior to joining GeoLinks, Philip held a number of executive management positions with innovative technology-based startups. And one of the recent accomplishments of GeoLinks is they were awarded, their CEO, a seat at the table on the FCC board for telecommunications. So really powerful presence in our environment, in our community here, and we're thrilled to have him here today. So Philip, come on.
Good morning, everyone. As Mike said, my name is Philip Deneve, local company GeoLinks. We recently had a name change. You might have seen our building in Ventura's California Internet on the 101 freeway sign. The reason for the name change is actually FCC Chairman Pai. We were doing some work with anchor institutions throughout the state of California, wanted to expand that reach, and he said he had seen all of our demos come across his desk and said, you can't help your California Internet. you guys can't come outside of California. That's not necessarily the case. We have clients all over the nation, so it is probably been the greatest thing that we've done is change our name. It's got us, talking nationally and internationally, but we're never going to forget where we came from. The founders of the company are from Ojai. I live in Santa Paula. We employ over 60 Ventura County residents, and it's going to be our passion to continue to grow our company and sort of close the digital divide within our county, within the Tri-County area, and expand that out. Over the past couple of weeks, since I've met Mike and Bill and joined the Broadband Consortium, I've been thinking about this talk and what that disruption means. It's sort of a scary word for a lot of people. A lot of people don't like change. And I decided to share a little bit about my personal story, as well as where the company has come from and where we're headed, to sort of paint a picture on how we can all play a role in closing this digital divide and what it means outside of the buzzwords, and how it actually affects change in people's lives and how there's stories behind all of these different numbers that are up on the screens and that we'll continue to talk about. So, I'm 32 years old. I was born in Inglewood, California, and I spent the last half of my life here in Ventura County. For the first half of my life, I was raised by a single parent. My mom had me when she was 17 years old. Father was absent in my life. Luckily for me, I had an uncle who was in real estate, was very successful, and was able to give me access to technology at a very young age. I got my first computer and my first internet connection at age 10, and since then, I've been hooked. I did not follow the traditional route of getting a formal education because that opportunity was not afforded to me just based on my economic standing. However, I continue to invest in my education through access through the internet. I'm not sure how many of you guys are familiar with a program called edx.org, but all of the major colleges put on courses that anyone can sign up for free. And I've been able to accumulate the same amount of courses that most of the people have as far as bachelor's and MBAs go by being self-taught. And through that, I've been able to become financially independent and achieve what I believe is the American dream. At 32, I'm a homeowner. I'm happily married. My wife is a stay-at-home wife pursuing her own education. My daughter is a competitive gymnast. She gets to travel the world with me as I go and do these conferences. And I've sort of shifted what was supposed to happen in my life. Study after study shows that most people stay in their class. And that could have been my path, but it wasn't. And the reason that it wasn't is because I got access to internet at a very young age, and I was encouraged to use it. And I was encouraged to use it for the right reasons. To explore, to educate, to keep an open mind, to learn about different cultures and learn about the world. And I can see that happening in my community, both in a positive way and a negative way. In the city of Santa Paula, we're a small town, about 30,000 people. The median income is $40,000 a year. That has a lot to do with the lack of infrastructure that we have and the lack of opportunity and hope that people have because we don't have the infrastructure and there's not enough debate and conversation around what we're going to do about it. And for me, running a company here as the chief revenue officer, a lot of you might be asking, what does that mean? I'm not a CFO. I don't do accounting and I don't do taxes. I oversee the day-to-day sales operations, the marketing operations, customer service, and public relations. So I'm responsible for not only generating the revenue, but then keeping that revenue there. So I'm deeply vested into what our clients are doing, how to gain market share, and how to keep those clients happy. That means that I have to be well-versed in every business. And I have to be well-versed in what anchor institutions need, what cities need, what counties need in order to thrive in this digital economy. And what I'm seeing more and more of is what everyone's been talking about. The affluent areas are able to invest into technology. The reason why our company has seen this explosive growth, 784% over the last 3 years, is we got our start, our real big start in the Lake Sherwood community. As most of you guys are familiar, pretty affluent area in Westlake. And these houses that are $5, $6, $10 million had no internet access outside of DSL. We took a moonshot and drew in a bid to build out an exclusive infrastructure to serve the Lake Sherwood community. We won that bid, and now we partner with the development communities and connect all of the houses so that they can market them. market them as connected to high-speed internet. We ran into Amgen executives, Fox News, a lot of different people that were just mesmerized by what we were able to accomplish with our innovative technology. And they really gave us the confidence to go out and start marketing this and investing in our infrastructure throughout Southern California. Now, 5 guys, 6 years ago, $15,000 in cash, working out of a weight room, thinking that we're going to change the world. We're going to take on the AT&Ts, the Verizons, all of that. Well, we figured out the hard way. That's not going to happen. You know, they will outspend us every day, and they will crush us. So we decided to do something different with the way that we were going to connect our customers and the world to the internet. We partnered with different companies to invest in renewable energy and figured out how to use this wireless technology to fix that last mile connection. So we own and operate about 200 towers across Southern California, and over 80% of them are powered by solar panels and wind turbines. What that means is that we can go places where other people can't. For instance, our building is right on the other side of Camarillo Ranch House. It's the old Zindagi Games building. We recently moved in there. We are serving ourselves with our own wireless connection that's over on the hillside over there that is 100% renewable energy. That means that everyone that can see that ridge line can be connected to high-speed internet access. We can do this faster and more affordable than any other technology that's out there. Now, people have a lot of questions about microwave technology, and there's what we call wireless anxiety. Does it work? Will it be reliable? And the answer is yes. And the reason that the answer is yes is because we've engineered it such a way. If you have a problem with your cell phone, with your wireline connection at home, you don't blame the technology, you blame the company. The same is not true for wireless companies. When something goes wrong with wireless, it's the entire technology. Well, we've invested years and years and millions of dollars in perfecting this. And through that perfection and that drive for perfection, we've discovered ways to optimize this technology to connect schools and anchor institutions throughout the state of California that were thought unservable. In the end of 2016, we successfully built a multi-gigabit backbone to Catalina Island. We are the primary connection for both Avalon and Two Harbors for the Conservancy and for the Catalina Broadband Company. That means that these people on the island who have been left on the other side of the digital divide can now do things like operate their small business, run their credit card machine, and the students there can stay there and not have to worry about what they're going to do when they get older, which is something that in this Tri-County area, I see more and more of. A lot of my friends are much more smarter than me. And when they get done with college, they come back to Ventura County and they can't find a job that suits the education that they went out to do. So they leave and they take their tax dollars with them. That is something that we want to change here. We want to create high-paying jobs in tech using innovative technology and renewable energy. We also want to create different types of jobs. We're a general contractor and we're also a licensed electrician. That means that we can create construction jobs in technology. We have people building solar panel sites out in Yosemite National Forest to service the elementary school that's there, where the kids are getting bussed out an hour each way just to take their state mandated testing. We're reaching places like Hume Lake, California, which has a school there with over 100 students that are also being bussed out, about 2.5 hours each way. And we're doing this by combining technology with construction. And this, to me, is going to create the biggest opportunity for the Tri-County area to change the grades that we saw up on the screen. A lot of people don't know who we are, and we're working to change that. Because we want you guys to understand that we're here to partner with you guys. We're here to partner with the other telcos. We're here to partner with everyone that we can to fix this issue and to empower all of our neighbors to be able to compete in this digital economy. It is not going away. It is a social issue. It is not a Republican issue. It is not a Democrat issue. It is how do we future-proof the future generations to be able to compete so that they can stay here, so that they can telecommute to the opportunities that are in Silicon Valley, that are in Santa Monica, and not have to leave. One of the biggest issues that I can see in the day-to-day here is people cannot afford to work where they live, and they cannot afford to live where they work. And that is just heartbreaking to me. I see so many of my friends that are very bright individuals competing for jobs that are paying $12 an hour, $15 an hour. And they are CUCI graduates, they're UCLA graduates, they're USC graduates. They want to stay here. This is paradise, guys. We have the beach. We're an hour away from the mountains. We can go hiking, we can go fishing. We can do everything here, but we can't pay our people enough to stay. So they're forced to leave. And it's heartbreaking to me because I love this town. I moved around all across California growing up because my mom was doing it. She was chasing the buck. If someone will pay me $1 more an hour here, then we'll move here. Through that process, I went through 17 different schools. I've seen California from San Diego up to almost the Oregon border. After I came here, and my mom has still continued to move on, chasing the dollar and the American dream, I've planted my roots here, and I'm here to stay, and I am deeply vested into this community, into the Tri-County areas, and helping our neighbors. So I'm here mostly just to let you guys know that we're here. We want to work with you guys. We want to help. We're not here to knock any other telecommunications company, because as Mike said, we need the fiber backbones. We're here to figure out how we can partner with local municipalities and other telecommunications companies to fix the problems that you guys are seeing day to day. Because it will spur business, it will spur economic development and economic growth. We will keep more people in these communities, and we will raise the standard of living, which I believe is the first step at rebuilding the middle class, is what we're looking for. Because the income inequality across the Tri-County is very bad in my opinion. There's very few at the top. The middle is shrinking, and there's more and more people that are coming out of college that are in my age range, in their mid-30s, that cannot find a job that can put them in a position to compete in this real estate market. So they have to go other places, and we're breaking up families because moms and dads are now having to both work and commute over 2 hours a day just to get by. I've lived that life, I grew up in that world, and it's not fun as a kid. I can tell you guys from personal experience. My mom working 10, 12 hours a day plus commuting, she was wiped out on weekends. One of the biggest things that we're working on at GeoLinks is creating a culture that is family-oriented. We encourage our employees to take their PTO. No one has to ask to go to their child's games, to their recitals, to their award ceremonies. We have an open door policy. We will actually criticize you if you miss it, because there's nothing at work that's more important than your family, and that's what we want to build. We're doing things that we didn't know were possible at first, but our new maternity/paternity program, we will cover the other 45% that the state doesn't cover when you go on maternity leave, and we will cover you at 100% for an additional 6 weeks so that you can get that bonding time with your family. We are piloting telecommuting opportunities. I'm the first one. I have a child that's due in January. I started to take time off now, and I'm going to take a full 12 weeks of paternity leave to make sure that I'm there to support my wife and my new daughter that's coming to the world. And after that, I don't know if I'm going to go back to the office. I still am secure that I'm going to have a job, and I'm going to have a position to go to, but it may not be that I'm in the office every day. And I want to continue to promote this idea because I believe that it's where the future is headed, and if we don't do something very soon in the next year, in the next 3 to 5 years, this digital economy is going to take us by storm, and all of the jobs are going to be elsewhere. As he said, Kansas City is bidding on the Amazon HQ job. Well, so is Oxnard. And if we can't prove to these large corporations that we not only have the infrastructure, but the talent pool that is ready to compete in the digital economy, we're not going to win these RFPs for these large companies who want to invest in it. So all of that to say, guys, if you have any questions about how you can affect change in your community, it's going to come from people like me and people like the entrepreneurs that came from this community, that have stayed in this community, that want to stay in this community. And we want to work with local municipalities on how to fix your issues. How do we close the digital divide? because it's not going to come from the mobile networks. I just ran a speed test while I was in the back of the room on my Verizon LTE connection. It was 6 megabits by 0.9. I can't do anything with that. I mean, emails are very lagged and everything like that. 4G was supposed to fix it, 5G is not going to fix it. 5G is going to be great for certain applications, but it's not what's going to power our residents to educate themselves, to start new businesses. Mobile hotspots are not going to allow you to run an entire business. They're great when you're in a jam, they're great when you're traveling. I throw my mobile hotspot in when my daughter's in the back so she can play on her iPod. But I can't run that from my house. I'm one of the lucky ones in Santa Paula who knows about my company, obviously, so I have a gigabit connection at my house. That means that I can do more things than most people in Santa Paula. That means that I can show my daughter how to teach herself, how to research things. She's only in 3rd grade now, but she's reading at a 6th grade reading. She's doing math at 7th grade. And that's because I showed her how to use this tool, how to research, how to have an open mind, and how to bend the rules on how to get the information that you need. And self-education is going to be the future of how people can change their current economic status. Not all of us can afford to go back to school and invest into something. Some of us need to take shortcuts. And those shortcuts live on the internet. It's going to be the fastest way to get the information out to the people and allow them to innovate and come up with their own ideas. So I'm not here to tell people that they need to do it a particular way. I just want to provide the open access. I'm not a big fan of our current FCC's chairman's stance on net neutrality and what he's trying to do with the standards, but that's okay because we're going to do something different and we're going to do it because it needs to be done, not because someone else told us that it had to be done. So with that, guys, I will open it up for some questions, and I wanted just to thank everyone again for coming out today.
Given the schedule that we have, we're going to have to suspend the questions for now. So will you be able to stay with us?
Yes.
Yeah, so Philip will still be here to the summit if you have questions for him. Thank you very much, Philip. So we've heard today about the impacts of gigabit connectivity in a city and the capital investment that brought 290% increase in CapEx investment for startup and business development, and that just as one metric. We also have heard about the coming Internet of Things and how that's going to impact the demands for broadband and the video bandwidth as well. We've just heard from Philip from GeoLinks about the possibility of solving the last mile gap and then the profound impact that broadband has had on his personal story and what that means to so many people's lives in our communities. We're going to shift a little bit now and talk about what we can do as public leaders in helping expand broadband in our area. And so our next speaker, just advance this a little bit, is going to talk to us about what their experience is in working with municipalities and counties around. You want a break? I'm seeing some hands raised. Okay, so we were going to, for time, forego the break, but we're going to give you all a break. We've talked for a while. We'll give a short 5-minute break because we still have some more material to cover. The restrooms are right out this way to the right. So 5 minutes. In your stock portfolio, you've probably seen that Crown Castle has been acquiring a number of other fiber companies, Wilcon, Synesis a while ago, Light Tower just recently. So they have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of route mile of fiber, and one of their primary support areas is with cellular backhaul and small cell, which is the foundation for cellular 5th generation networking. And so Scott is the government relations manager for their small cell and fiber solutions division. In this capacity, Scott is responsible for all government relations activities in Southern California and is managing the development of over 5,000 small cells throughout Southern California alone. That gives you an indication of the type of growth that we're going to be seeing and that is anticipated, obviously, by these cellular organizations in our region, just in Southern California alone. So please join me in welcoming Scott Longhurst.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for having us this morning. My boss, Dan Schweitzer, who was supposed to be here, unfortunately had a herniated disc and had to go in for surgery. So I was tapped to come in and be able to speak to this audience, and I appreciate you having me. Let me just get to our slide presentation here. Just a couple brief slides on Crown, who we are. Mike did a great introduction. So we're a public utility. We're generally classified as a telephone corporation. Here in California, the PUC has granted us a CPCN, the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity, which allows Crown to provide telephony services in the public rights-of-way and to utilize the public right-of-way for the provisioning of fiber and other types of infrastructure. Again, we're a stable partner with our partners. We have about $4 billion in annual revenue. We have a market cap of about $45 billion. And we're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. As Mike, we started out as a tower company back in 1994. You'll see in another slide, building towers. We were then successful in approaching the wireless carriers themselves, and we bought several portfolios of towers. We now own over 40,000 towers and communications facilities across the United States. And you can see there 71% of those are in the top 100 markets, and about 56% or so are in the top 50 markets across the United States. So much like some of the other maps you saw, heavily concentrated on the eastern half of the country. It's a little sparse in the heartland until we get over to the left coast there, where we get a little more density. Right now, we're working on over 50,000 small cells across the United States. Like I mentioned, we have over 5,000 right now currently in development here in the Southern California region, which for us generally extends from Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, down to San Diego, and east to the border with Nevada and Arizona. We also have purchased over the last 5 years, Crown saw through their involvement with the wireless carriers on the tower side of the business that the old copper plant was not sufficient to backhaul needs, so a lot of the carriers were provisioning fiber to the cell sites that we own. So we decided to take a look at that business and see if we could offer that service directly to our customers. So we started in on purchasing fiber companies, and that was our entree into the whole fiber business. We're in the process of closing a deal with Light Tower on the East Coast, and we will eventually have over 60,000 miles of fiber once that deal is consummated. So we take more of a kind of an all-inclusive approach. Obviously, we utilize fiber for our backhaul, but by owning towers and wireless facilities, we can bring to bear in the community a multitude of different solutions depending on what the issue is that we're trying to resolve. Again, these shared resources are the best that we see. We try and co-locate. Obviously, we lease real estate, if you will. We are organized as a REIT, so rather than own office buildings or apartment buildings and lease by the square foot, we own towers, and we lease out that vertical real estate. So for us, the more tenants we have, the more profitable the facility is. Here's a basic slide here on kind of the network topology for fiber networks. Those of you are probably pretty familiar with this. We have the point-to-point, point-to-multi-point. We have the protected ring if you are an institution that has several campuses, for instance, and you want a private fiber ring. We can provide that type of service to you as well. And then we also do the transport back to data centers. This is just an overview of Synesis, a company that we purchased a couple years ago. This is their fiber plant as it is today in Ventura County. We're working to expand that basically on a daily basis. So as new business opportunities present themselves, we'll be out laying additional fiber. Again, some slides basically on the, how the impact that the telecom industry has on the U.S. Economy. $270 billion in investment expected in infrastructure over the next 7 years. That'll probably end up being much more than that. 90% of the households down in the United States have at least one mobile phone. Won't be too long till, that's 100%. And right now we're seeing it's a little over, but roughly 70% of all 911 calls made in the United States are via the cell phone. So that, get into a little more here down the road, but that's a very important point for you as local municipal managers and elected officials. We want to ensure that when you dial 911, you reach somebody. And that's everywhere all the time, as was mentioned earlier, whether you're broken down on the side of the road and out in the country, or someone in your household, God forbid, is having a heart attack or something. When you dial 911, you expect somebody to answer and provide you help. We don't want a situation where that call doesn't go. Some other metrics, it's a little over 50% now, but of all households rely exclusively on their mobile phones, much like we heard earlier about cable television. A lot of families now are cutting the cord for the old landlines. They're moving solely towards cell phones, and again, that necessitates a robust wireless environment in residential communities, which historically the zoning codes have prohibited wireless facilities to be built in residential zones. Typically, those are what we call the macro cells, which you all refer to as cell sites, and the big towers with the panel antennas that are on rooftops of buildings. So we're looking at utilizing the small cell technology, as our clients, the carriers are, to provide that robust level of wireless service now into the residential communities. Video, over 75% of the data by 2020, or mobile data by 2020 will be video. All of us with kids know that they love to stream video and upload photos and everything. And just prior to the iPhone, about 10 years ago, and we talked about this a little earlier, but that was a real paradigm shift for the wireless industry. Up until that point, roughly 80% or so of the traffic on the networks were voice. We all had, the Motorola flip phone, and we used it to make phone calls and maybe do some really remedial kind of text-based internet or text messaging. But when the iPhone came out, it changed everything. And for those of you that weren't AT&T customers, when AT&T had an exclusive agreement with Apple, we got to sit back for a couple of years and watch AT&T go through their trials and tribulations, because a network that was really engineered for voice all of a sudden had everything flipped 180 degrees, and all of a sudden 80-90% of the traffic on their network was data. And it just really wasn't engineered to handle that. So over the last 10 years, as we've gone from 2G to 3G, now into 4G, a lot of that work was being done to tackle that data issue. So again, the technology is creating the need for the infrastructure. Again, a couple more metrics. In the next few years, we're going to go from 450 roughly million devices to almost 1 billion. Wearable devices are increasing at 18 times, by 2020 from what we have now. And again, as we discussed a little earlier, the machine-to-machine connections, there's going to be over 5.4 billion of those by 2024. So explosive growth. Kind of the same data, a little different metrics, but again, you can see the number of devices that are connected per user is growing, as is the traffic. Again, what we're facing now on our side is network capacity issues. The carriers have done a pretty good job of providing coverage via the macro cell environment or facilities, but as all of us have experienced, you may have 2, 3, 4 bars on your phone, but you can't initiate a call or download something, and that's because there's just too much traffic on that sector of the network. So that's where the carriers, our customers, have come to Crown and are basically leveraging or utilizing our fiber network now to offload traffic from the small site facility on our fiber network to improve the capacity that their macro cells have. So that's really the play that we're working with them on, is how do we get all that data and all that traffic off of the network, especially for services that require low latency and other things, because it's very important that the antenna be as close to the end user as possible for some of these new technologies that are being developed. So again, there's a multitude of different technologies that we can bring to bear, from the macro cell to the small cell. We try and utilize existing vertical elements if at all possible. We're a member of the JPA, the Joint Pole Authority, and the Joint Pole Committee, so we can utilize existing utility poles to mount the equipment. We've negotiated and are continuing to negotiate agreements with local jurisdictions to utilize street light poles, traffic signal poles, anything we can do to try and avoid the necessity of introducing new vertical elements into your communities. So again, some of the benefits of this, obviously fiber is the foundation for future technological advancements, innovation, and the economic opportunities we've spoken about this morning. It'll facilitate the rollout of the Internet of Things, smart city technologies, obviously 5G. It enhances the public safety networks and communications capabilities. You know, obviously all of you recognize that your police and sheriffs and fire departments utilize wireless technologies, not only for communications, but also in their vehicles. When a highway patrol officer pulls someone over and runs their license number or something on the laptop in their cruiser, that's using a commercial wireless network. When the fire departments get their maps on their fire trucks to drive out, when someone needs their support, they're getting that data via a wireless connection. So if we don't have that wireless connectivity in certain areas, then our public safety officials and first responders could be at a disadvantage. So how do we accelerate the process? Well, that's the bottom line here, and really, we're here to try and educate you and give you some examples of what we feel might be helpful. Most of all of you here are on the internet or information technology side of your respective organizations. I deal a lot primarily with the more bureaucratic regulatory side of the house, so to speak. So your planning departments, your public works departments, your building and safety departments. And what we've seen over the last couple of years, as more of the facilities have moved off of the private property side into the public works side, that some of those processes and procedures have followed us. So what used to be a fairly straightforward ministerial permitting process with public works, you go in, you submit your drawings, they review them for the code, for GO 95, those types of things, and they issue your encroachment permit and away you go. Now we're starting to see some of the more discretionary, subjective regulatory issues come into the public right away. So things like aesthetics, even health to a certain extent, as some of these questions are being raised. Some jurisdictions are requiring facilities in the public right away to go through a public hearing process. So what all this has done is just added time, money, and general kind of frustration to the process, to our ability to roll out these networks so that people like yourselves can utilize those networks, and our commercial customers can also utilize those for their business purposes. So one of the things that I try and tell local jurisdictions is one of the best things that they could do in the short term really is to develop very concise design standards for facilities that are acceptable in your community. So if you can tell us, the industry, what type of street light pole you'd like to see, what type of stealth material or design you'd like to see if we were attaching a utility pole, and it has to be in conformance with those existing standards from the PUC and others. But if you can let us know what you'd like to see in your communities, we will build it. Because time is money for us. And so if you can entice us to build via an expedited permitting process the types of facilities you'd like to see in your communities, we will do so. Yes, there'll be that 1-5% of the sites that for whatever reason we can't do that, and we're perfectly open to going through a more rigorous approval process for those. But that would be the number one thing I think that you could do to help facilitate the rollout of the fiber backbone as well as these small cell nodes. So just a little bit more about Crown. We're kind of the middleman, if you will. We use the phrase we're the carrier's carrier. Because like I said, we're out there laying the wires. We're almost like electricians. We're putting in the electrical grid. What people are plugging into the sockets, we don't really know in certain cases, but they utilize that backbone for the transmission of data rather than electrons. So I deal a lot, like I said, with the wireless carriers. We're working for T-Mobile, AT&T, and Verizon right now. And like Mike mentioned, we have over 5,500 small cell sites going in across Southern California. And that's just basically for the next 12 to 18 months. And then there'll be another wave, and there'll be another wave. And you'll start to see more of that as it moves north. We're doing quite a bit of work up in Santa Barbara County right now, from Carpinteria to Santa Barbara City, County of Santa Barbara, up into Goleta, obviously the areas around UC Santa Barbara, but I'm confident that the carriers are going to want to expand that technology up towards San Luis Obispo. So again, we're safe. We feel that we're very safe for your community as well. That side of things, we're regulated by the FCC. All of our equipment meets the ANSI standards. We cannot and will not interfere with your local communications networks. So we're confident that the technology and the facilities that we're building are safe and secure for your community. Again, we want to be a partner with all of you. We look at this as a collaborative effort. It's not something that any of us can do on our own. We've made tremendous strides in your communities. We're investing heavily in your communities, and we want to be a partner of yours for many years to come and support your efforts and those of your constituents as well as your local businesses. So that's really it. Thank you very much for your time. Be happy to answer questions, I guess, at the end of the session, or the time now. I'm happy to take those questions.
You have time for 2 to 3 questions.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Hi. In your experience when dealing with local planning commissions, are they seeing fiber build-outs as part of a utility, or just you're trying to come in commercially to do that?
Well, it's kind of a combination of both, and that's where we've been trying to do some education and trying to bifurcate the two, because sometimes the wireless component of it gets confused and the fiber gets lumped in with the wireless. So we're trying to educate groups like this, quite frankly, and other elected officials that the wireless node is one component, but the network itself is really comprised of the fiber. And so that should be dealt with as a public utility, and per the guidelines of GO 95 and the PUC. And really, we should be working primarily with public works on those issues, getting encroachment permits and TCPs and things like that. And we're happy to work on the wireless component too, but to have the same level of regulation that a 90-foot tower, that's in the middle of a park would have for a little, 12-inch tall antenna with an 8-inch square radio at the base of it, seems a little overkill. So we're trying to streamline that process again with the goal of getting this technology rolled out in a timely manner.
One more question?
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you, Scott. Well, now we're going to hear from one of our local cities that's experienced some success with implementing some practices and processes towards developing broadband in their city. And so we're going to hear from Ned Diaz, who's a current city council member in the city of Westlake Village. And he served on the city council since 2007, and also was a former mayor of the city of Westlake Village. In addition to his civic leadership, Ned has a private business that he's the CEO of, Azure Blues, which is a business consulting corporation. And prior to serving on the city council, he actually worked in the entertainment industry, in movie production. Among some of his accolades were receiving two-time winner of the DGA Best Directing Award for the work on the 1990s CBS Warner Brothers hit Murphy Brown, starring Candace Bergen. So with that, Ned, come tell us about the successes you've experienced in Westlake Village and your broadband development efforts.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna cut. Oh wow. Who's that guy? Let's go to this. Okay. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about are everybody's kind of hit already. I don't have to sell this group on broadband. which is unusual for me. Usually I'm talking to people who don't even know what broadband is. 10 years ago when I got on city council, we were trying to solve the problem in Westlake Village of just cell phone coverage. And the beauty of that is that we realized technology was going to become something more integrated in our lives and in city planning, and that we needed to create a formal committee as opposed to an ad hoc committee. So we needed to actually create a standing committee for technology, and over the last 10 years, I have been on that committee for 10 years, and I've had other council members cycle in and cycle out. And fortunately, whenever you get elected, you bring a certain amount of whatever your background is, whatever your talents are, to the conversation with your team, and the team being the council. And my experience on council has been mostly with lawyers who get elected. They're process guys. They know what processes are, and there's a lot of legal things obviously that happen, and procedural things. So lawyers make pretty good council members, except when it comes to technology. We have one council member who swears by WordPerfect. And it took a while to get to Word, but we finally did. But this slide just kind of underscores what everybody else has been saying. I just want to remind you that 2020 is only about 27 moons away. When you think about how many months it is or how many days it is, it's not very far. And when you realize the impact that has happened on technology, and I come from the television industry. When I started in television in the early 80s, television was an industry, and it meant a lot of things. When my mother started in the industry back in the 40s, it was just a device. Television was a device. Television has become a device again, and the entertainment business is no longer television or movies. It's now considered media. And if you look at what the use of bandwidth is, particularly in Westlake Village, because we have some industry, but we're about 3,000 families, 3,000 homes, and the biggest concern is bandwidth and the buffering and the inability to watch an uninterrupted stream. Am I right? So
I don't know what that is.
I'm sure you don't. And you're from Kansas, the show me guy. So when I got on, we were solving the cell phone problem, but basically there was a book published in 2006, I think it was, by Thomas Friedman. It's called The World is Flat. For those electeds in the office that are in this room that haven't read that book, I suggest you go back and read it. And read it fairly quickly, because it will take you from 1986, when the personal computer was developed and we basically entered a chip world, to 2006, which is still 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And it kind of brings you up to sort of where we are today in terms of technology and how it's impacted our lives. So the problem became, when it came to broadband, was people came to the city and said, we want Wi-Fi. We want Wi-Fi in the city. People were beginning to get connected using smartphones and whatnot. And so the question became, well, how is it even a city, should the city even be responsible for this? And there were some studies done that cities that were early adopters pushing Wi-Fi started running into problems of becoming blamed when the Wi-Fi didn't work, and it became kind of a Pandora's box. And quite frankly, when you open up Pandora's box in technology, and remember the early Pandora streaming music system, you basically start chasing something that you can't ever stop chasing. So once you get in the technology thing, it became quite clear that this is going to be creating more and more time and sucking more and more energy out of our staff. In the city of Westlake Village, we are 5.2 square miles. We have 11 people on staff at the city. Most of them do not use social media. They certainly don't use social media in their daily operations of the city, which is a problem for us, I think, at this point, because we're not able to sort of connect where we need to be connecting. But that's another issue. The problem we had was the lack of broadband service in the city. We basically had two ways of getting it, DSL through AT&T or Time Warner Cable. And neither one was particularly great at providing consistent service. But there was some signal, at least we weren't starting from scratch. But that was our problem. Single service provider, a lack of competition, so what you got wasn't really great, and you paid a lot of money for it. Because we're 5.2 square miles, we're not really economically competitive. We don't have enough market share to sort of drive things. So the other problem was we were an AT&T territory, and with the telephone companies being split up in the mid-'80s, turned into these territories, Fios was being rolled out in Thousand Oaks, but Westlake Village got nothing, except that AT&T finally came in and they put in, we allowed them to put in 13 boxes, these big technological boxes that make some noise and they're kind of cluttering the streets, but it was be able to provide some better service to a portion of our residents, not all of our residents. So what should we do? We had to create a city council goal that technology was going to be something that we wanted to tackle. That got it was kind of interesting because politics is pretty today and tomorrow, or we'll say today, tomorrow, and next week. And cycles, Jackie's every 2 years now, every 2 years. Jackie's every 2 years, she has to run for re-election. So it's kind of like you deal with the problems that are just like in your front of your face. And problems out in the future become more difficult to have this conversation because it's, what is my investment? What is the payoff? How are people going to realize that we're not wasting money, we're just throwing money into the ground or throwing money in the air or whatever we're doing? So we had to create a goal. What do you do in government? You study the problem. So part of the problem is defining the problem. And it took us a number of years just to come up with something that I learned was called an RFQ, a request for qualifications. How do we know how to hire a consultant in this industry? Because we don't do this. So how do we know that? So you take more meetings, you do more studies, and that's what we did. So, but the first thing we decided to do, well, if it's going to be technology, is that with a big T? So we had to create a strategic plan. Strategic plan was, well, what should be in a strategic plan? So you can see that we're not going to solve our Wi-Fi problem very quickly because we're still sitting around talking about it. But as government goes, or you've got to justify what you do in government. Sometimes, you ask your kids to do that and they don't quite make the mark, but you give them the money anyway. But in government, you really don't want to give somebody money that you don't know how it's really going to be spent and what your payback is. So we started with we got our little strategic document together, figured out what our real goals were in terms of having a technology strategy. But then we had to go to the city, to our constituents and ask them, what is it you really want? So we ran a survey. We hired a company to do that. And the company that we hired, this guy was great. He was an architect by education, but he used to work at IBM. So he had this sort of creative side and he had this real analytical side. And they were really good because they could create a chart that would explain anything. It was like Ross Perot. Here's all these dots. Here's what your people asked for. And it was like these graphs and stuff. It was really great because we could defend what we were about to decide to do. So what do you got to do? We learned from our cell phone, our entree into the cell phone challenge, that we needed to map signal. So cell phones, towers, where's the signals? What are the overlaps? Who are the companies that are controlling these towers? And so we learned, if you want to find out where your broadband is, you got to find out what's in the street. Fortunately, the Tri-Counties Consortium started, and we sort of inserted ourselves. We're in LA County technically, and we inserted ourselves into Bill and Mike's project. So it's the 3 tri-counties and Westlake Village is what I've got pushing. And so that's why I'm pretty much here today. So ground truthing became something that we needed to do. And we realized we needed yet another consultant. And so we hired another consultant to help us try to figure out what our solution is going to be. What do you already have? What assets can you tap? And who owns them? How do you get access to them? All that kind of stuff. We now know that clearly if Synesis came in, they would be doing the same thing, trying to figure out what would happen, or even CenturyLink or anybody else that wants to come in and work in our city, they would have to do this. We've done it for you guys. So we're ready. We're ready to start talking about what to do next. Development plan to enhance the broadband options within the city. So today, we have a clear idea of what we have in the street, and we have a clear idea if fiber is the answer to the last mile. We have a clear idea of sort of how we have to do that. That's what we discovered. There's an inconsistency of fiber throughout the city, and multiple entities own it. Just in this meeting today, I've heard claims from some of the vendors out there that they have fiber running down the 101 corridor. Well, okay, we'd like to talk to you about that. Knowing what really is there is still, I think, in my mind, is still a question. The sales guys always tell you it's the consultant, but it comes down to the blame. All right, so we're restricted by the knowledge that we have, where that fiber is, who actually owns it, and how big or how strong is it. We've also determined that maybe we wanted to invest incrementally in different parts of the city at different times. Depending on, we have a topographical issue because we have box canyons, we have hillsides, we have all sorts of things that make signal and even trenching somewhat challenging. We think that we can partner with some of the competitors in this room to bring about some change and some positive effects of putting in this infrastructure. I think we've pretty well determined that it is an infrastructure and it is a utility. And this makes it kind of interesting for how we're going to do that. How do we fund it? We don't know how to fund it. In dealing with the consortium stuff, we were hoping that by getting together, putting Westlake Village with a greater number of people, a number of entities, that we might be able to create a regional solution, a fiber loop going through the Conejo Valley, maybe all the way up through the Oxnard Plain, and figure out how that would drive industry and the economy in this sort of region here. I love the agricultural technology thing. I mean, you drive down Oxnard and just see all this stuff out there, and you go, wow. Imagine an RFID on every plant that's out there. Private-public partnerships, we'll share in this. When you get in private-public partnerships, control is always the issue. Governments like to be in control, or at least appear to be in control. So, moving forward, that's the famous line, lead, follow, or get out of the way. Westlake Village has done a fair amount of leading in our little part of Conejo. We do have a forward-looking attitude towards technology and bringing technology into our city, living with it more. We don't want to be that island, though, that ends up developing something with nothing to connect to. That would be a very big problem for us, so we don't want to get too far ahead, but we want to have a plan. Westlake Village was literally invented in 1965, 1966. It became one of the first planned communities in California. I'm hearing a lot about technology on light posts. Westlake Village doesn't own its own light posts; those are Edison owned. So that's going to be a bit of a challenge for us. We also don't have telephone poles. unlike our neighbors on either side, people who designed our community buried all of the utilities 45 years ago when there were sheep bordering Westlake Village. I mean, it's crazy. So today, we need to figure out how to develop the tools to react to opportunities. Now, just in this room today, the idea of 5G or some sort of wireless solution that may remove our decision to actually dig in our streets and put fiber in the last mile, that may have already happened. Now, Google pulled out of LA for some reason. Was that it? I don't know. It's kind of interesting. The one thing we have done is we tried to make coming to Westlake Village and working with us a little easier. We're trying to reduce the barriers, the bureaucratic barriers to entry. Dig Once policy is what we're working on. We're trying to get that going. The gas company was putting in a gas line. They just started last week. And it's not on what we consider an artery, but it's in a very difficult place. And unfortunately, we were not able to get it together well enough to have them do a notched trench to be able to put our conduit just to the right of what they're doing. The other thing we found out, and probably we should, I know Santa Cruz is very proactive with this, and we should probably be calling Santa Cruz to figure this out. But when you get to the municipal part and you start sharing a trench, liability comes into play. So what do you do if your trench, you need to access that trench, who's going to do that if you got a problem? So there's these easements and discussions, there's legal things that can be solved, and I can guess that's going to take us another 10 years to figure that out too. One of the things we're going to do in our city is first keep checking back. Is the path we're on the path we need to be on? Right? Is it really fiber in the street for our town? Is that really where the end is, or is that just going to be a sort of a backbone thing that we need to put in and have some other solution? We're going to take a vote. I think what we're going to try and do is put an advisory on our next ballot to ask our voters what they would do. Do they want to float a bond, 20 million, 30 million bucks? They want to float a bond to get this current technology into the street. Do they want to wait, lead, follow, or get out of the way? They want to wait for the market to catch up and just sort of have it happen? Or do we want to get out of the way and let some company come in and just kind of put it in and see how we're going to pay for that? I don't know. But I do know this. 10 years it's taken to get this far to explain what broadband is, how it's going to affect your life. I think our constituents, it's already affecting their lives. They may not sit down and figure out all the Internet of Things kind of things. But as city leaders, we have to be aware of that, and we have to pay attention to that. Fortunately, Westlake Village has always been fairly forward-thinking, as our founders figured out in the 1960s, which was a technological decade. I'd say the science decade was the 50s, technologies was 60s, and now we're back kind of to another technology decade again. So with that, happy to answer any questions about our trials and tribulations or anything we can help you do. I do think the regional approach is still the way to go, especially for small cities. The Conejo Valley in and of itself has a tremendous amount of talent, both artistically and technologically. We have more musicians, more artists, and more technologists living there. Cal Lu, I'm going to put a plug in for our friends in Thousand Oaks. Cal Lu has an incubator that sits right in the corner of Lindero Canyon and Aurora Road. It's called the Hub 101. That is our center of innovation. The city of Westlake Village has one elementary school in its entire 5.2 square miles. It's the only school we have. And innovation can start there, but elementary school is a place where you start to dream, and the Hub 101 is where you start actualizing that dream. And it's a great place, but in that Hub 101, they have very poor cell service. So they've got a pretty robust Wi-Fi repeater. But that is, and you know, in business, if you're going to stay in business, research and development is what keeps you in business, because it's what keeps you moving forward, it keeps you pushing it forward. Fortunately for Westlake Village, our business perhaps Hub 101 is going to be the driving thing that keeps businesses are starting or at least beginning in Westlake Village and holding them hopefully in the region, because we're going to have the connectivity they're going to need to be successful in the future. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Ned. No,
There we go. Good morning, everyone. Everybody, thank you so much for all the speakers, all of you guys for being here and for sticking with us so long. My name is Bruce Densley. I'm president of the Economic Development Corporation. You might ask why we're a partner in establishing this consortium and convening these kinds of meetings. As a public-private partnership, it is our mission in economic development to retain and grow the local economy, to attract new business when we can, and especially, of course, to spur entrepreneurship to create new business when we can. So this notion around establishing the imperative. To do those three activities in economic development I just mentioned, we know that we need to do a couple of things. That is, concentrate on our key assets. One of them, of course, is the skill of our workforce, the quality of our education, but the education and quality workforce is no asset if we're not connecting it and networking it and making sure that it's connected locally and globally. So toward that end, we've established this Broadband Consortium. And today, actually in the Broadband Consortium, we have these cool little cards laying on the table here. And it's our mission and vision and action plan that's articulated on those, enabling the power of broadband as a catalyst for economic development, right? So you've heard all about that today. So I just want to make three real quick comments on why we concentrated this event today, focusing and inviting public sector leadership, elected officials, city and county officials to participate in this activity. And the first has to do with leadership. We know, as Ned just pointed out, lead, follow, or get out of the way. We would submit that it's too late to even try and get out of the way. It's too late to be reactive. The question right now is, what is leadership going to do to set a policy environment that establishes expectations and creates policy and practice that enables effective implementation as efficiently as possible. And so we encourage all of you to take to heart Ned's message and the message earlier about the urgency. The second issue is that we believe absolutely, and we've witnessed from presentation already, the effectiveness and urgency and immediate impact that cities, counties, municipal agencies can take relative to smart cities. We believe as cities that move ahead, as Matt started us out with the county this morning, in smart city sort of activity, how are we dealing with health, public safety, all of those activities, through public and private sector partnership, and the public sector can set real example about where to go and where we need to be with all of the technological change. And third and finally, and I'll get out of your way, it's really about collecting, establishing, and sharing data and doing a lot in the engagement for action on some of the fundamental issues, as Philip identified, enabling our closing of the digital divides. This has to do with the acceleration of business at the top end, with the enabling of talent in the middle and the bottom end and throughout the economic spectrum. So we're thrilled to be a partner with you and encourage you to follow the path that Ned just identified a moment ago. For the next, I will turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Bruce. So we wanted to send you away today with some tools to help with broadband development and these steps that we urge you to consider and to take action on to help develop broadband in your areas, in your cities, at the county. And one of the first things you can do is inventory the assets that you have. We heard from some great information from Crown Castle on what can facilitate broadband development from telecommunications providers. And so many cities have conduits where your street lights are controlled from, and there's excess capacity in those conduits. So by inventorying all of the assets that you have, whether they're streetlight conduits, we are aware of a fiber engineering company that has identified a solution to put fiber inside water lines and wastewater lines. And so that's a tremendous opportunity as well, where maybe you don't have the pole infrastructure that you need. So if you have assets that you can offer up. If, say, it's an RFP you go out to provide broadband in your area, and you offer up those assets, that's one way that you can facilitate broadband development in the region. Another area is with policies and standards, having predefined, as was shared, conduit specifications, design specifications that can streamline the permitting process, the plan review, to shorten that time gap. We have heard, we have telecommunications partners sitting and participating on the Broadband Consortium. We've heard to a T from every single one of them that says, we will go to the places that can streamline that process. We tend to shy away from places where it's onerous. So whatever we can do to facilitate planning, permitting, design, that's an advantage to building out broadband in our region. And lastly, as you heard, a very compelling case from Ned Davis, to have a strategic plan, to identify the low-hanging fruit. Where are the quick win opportunities in your area? If you can get broadband to this commercial sector or into this neighborhood, that is a quick win. You can then build upon that strategically. We're working with East Area 1 development in Santa Paula to make that a digital community and leverage the infrastructure that's going to go into place there to expand coverage into other areas of Santa Paula, much as Philip shared. There are some areas of significant need throughout that region, and so building on these opportunities to enhance broadband in these regions. Thirdly, convene stakeholders. It's important to have public-private partnership in broadband development. We already talked about developing these projects and then connecting with regional resources. I encourage all of you, if you're not participating in the Broadband Consortium, to have some participation. There's so much strength that comes there from opportunities, from knowledge. Because we have a good collection in the Broadband Consortium, we have telecommunication companies, we have cities, we have the county, we have our leaders from education on that consortium as well. Collectively, we've been able to accomplish much with that strength. And also, so that all is not lost, we have a toolkit for you today. We have USB drives that we are, USB devices that we will give you to take back. It has a guide for community leaders who are seeking affordable, abundant bandwidth, and has steps and use cases and scenarios that you can use to leverage your broadband plans and goals in your cities and at the county. We have the research document that we commissioned of an assessment of broadband throughout our region that covers all of the cities in the county, the unincorporated, et cetera. So you can use that to help prioritize efforts where you think that best meets the needs of your constituents. We also have policy samples and templates on there to help with Dig Once policies, et cetera, and the municipal broadband roadmap information in there as well. I mentioned it before, but I encourage you to get plugged into the Broadband Consortium. We have some additional resources. One of the things that we recently contracted for and subscribed to is a fiber locating app. And so we can put in a location of the county and it will show you all of the fiber that it's aware of in that area. So we recently worked with the city of Moore Park and the city of Ojai to identify what fiber infrastructure is in their area. And it can tell you lit fiber, dark fiber, where fiber is going to businesses and the residential areas, and it give you an assessment of what kind of speeds those are at. And it also identifies fiber. There's a notion of long haul fiber. So you may have fiber running through your area. Ned talked about that down the 101. But oftentimes that's known as long haul fiber. That's going from Ventura down to LA. We can't break into that fiber and tap into it into our community. So it classifies, this fiber locator service classifies fiber into its different types. So you know which ones you might be able to strategically leverage for bringing more broadband into your areas. Again, best practice guidance of the Broadband Consortium, because we have industry partners and civic partners as well. There's a lot of great opportunity. And then we are continually seeking grant funding opportunities to be able to offset the capital investment involved with infrastructure. It's not free, but unless we plan for it and bring in other sources of income, we won't be able to influence broadband development in our areas. So with that, I'll invite Bruce just to recap our intended outcomes from today.
I think you can read them pretty well. The hour is late, but we have hoped that we have left you with a little bit of knowledge about what actually is happening in the world. I don't think we had to do a big sell on that to this group, but the sense of urgency is critical. But while we may know it, the question is collectively, how are we going to make sure that we broaden the circle of awareness, people in leadership positions, about what's going on in the change and the fast pace of change in technology. We're trying to present you and make sure that we have given you resources and tools on what can be done in terms of leadership, adopting policies, setting practices, moving and implementing those, and the tools to facilitate that growth. We are thrilled that you are all here. We know that we don't have all the answers. We know that we'll probably leave you with as many questions, as far more questions than answers. But we know that if we don't act now, we will be victims of a moving economy and a moving set of technology. We're thrilled that all of you have been here today. A round of applause for all of our presenters, please. There's plenty of folks. Yes, sir.
Make sure that the flash drives are on the table there in that box.
In that box, that sacred box. So we'll help. Mike will help start throwing those around. You'll probably get hit in the head. Thanks so much. Thanks for being here. Take care.
Full of viruses.